This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, I will be speaking with actress Jacky O'Shaughnessy. It's another in my Actors on Acting series, and the conversation will begin in a minute. This is another in my Actors on Acting series. The woman before you is Jacqueline O'Shaughnessy. Call her Jacky. And she is a model. She's an actress. And she has had a career in theater, television, and film. So welcome, Jacky, as I usually like to do. If you could give a little bit of a background about yourself, where you came from, how you got into the arts, acting specifically, and so forth.
Well, I was born in Connecticut, Litchfield, Connecticut. I lived there until I was 12. And then we moved to New Jersey. I spent my, 8th grade through senior year in high school in New Jersey. And then 3 days after I graduated from high school, I had a Gal Friday job in Manhattan that my sister had gotten me. And I started commuting into Manhattan. And 3 months later, I moved into Manhattan. So I had 2 roommates, 17 years old, living in New York. And after about a year, I applied to NYU School of the Arts and got accepted there and spent 2 years there. And then I started studying with Uta Hagen. I studied with her for 5 years. And that was magic. But I knew I wanted to be an actress when I was 5, because I would see certain movies, and like the Nun story, and I thought I wanted to be a nun. And then I would see another movie, and I thought I wanted to be a cowgirl. And I think by the third imagination of it, I thought, no, I don't want to be any of those things. I just want to play them. And I knew that I want to act. I knew when I was 5. So.
Well, what kind of a family did you come from? Was your mother or father an actress? Did you have relatives? Were you from like a Barrymore wannabe clan, or were you the first person to really have an artistic interest in your family?
Well, all of us have artistic natures, but my mom was, she was an artist. She didn't take up her art really actively until her 60s, 50s and 60s. But she could sing and play the piano, and she loved it. But she used to say to me, I wanted to be a singer. That's what she told me, was a singer. She said I didn't have the guts. And it wasn't until I think the last year of her life that I asked her, Mom, what would you have been if you could, because there were 7 kids in our family. What would you have been had you been able to be anything you wanted to be? She looked at me and she said, an actress. I had no idea. But as I said, she was very artistic. Holidays were fantastic. She would do wonderful things. And all of my sisters and brother, we were all encouraged to. We were given singing lessons, dancing lessons, that sort of thing. So we were highly encouraged to go after whatever we wanted to do in the arts. Yeah.
What did you watch as a youngster? Because you would have grown up in what I would consider one of the more classic eras of television and film. When you were young in your teen years, there was the new Hollywood.
Yeah.
Well, the new Hollywood in the 60s. You would have been just coming of age then. Did that fuel your desire, or was that something, let's say, at 3 or 4 years old, were you the center of birthday parties as well? What specifically attracts you to acting?
The center of birthday parties?
You know, there's always the little kids who know that you hear stories of people saying they knew, when Uncle Bob came over, they would get up and they'd be the center of attention at the family gathering kind of thing.
Yeah, I was never comfortable with that.
No.
I was very shy about it, mainly singing. We were always, I wasn't comfortable. So no, one girl, Hannah and I, one of my friends, we put on a show at her barn one time, that sort of thing, but I wasn't jumping up all the time to be, look at me, look at me. It's very shy in that regard. But what was the other side of that question?
Well, is acting more or less a way for you to express yourself or to get away from yourself? I've heard actors say both ends, that it's a way to get outside of their walls, their barriers, and other people feel it's the deepest expression of themselves.
I would put it that I feel when I'm acting, I feel that I use the most of myself.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to being a secretary or a waitress, which I've been. Mm-hmm. You know, you use only certain parts of yourself to do those jobs. But when you're acting, for me, I was using the most of myself. Mm-hmm. And that feels good.
Yeah. So when you were in high school, were you trying out for plays then, as early as then? Or was
yes.
it to,
Yes, and I had a marvelous drama class. Uh-huh. And I remember I did a scene, Anastasia, and, you know, it was the kind of thing where I was talking to imaginary grandmother, mm-hmm. and there was just no sound of any kind. There was a little stage off to the side of the room. And there was a monologue, she had not a true monologue, but a spate of speaking as Anastasia. And at the end, she faints. And when I stood up, 3 girls in the class were crying. And I was stunned by that and thought, what power, not to make people feel a certain way, but the communion of it. I was very moved by it. I mean, I wasn't expecting it. I didn't need pats on the back. It was nice to be told I was very good and encouraged, but there was more expansion than I expected to experience, and I felt I was on the right track with it.
You just spoke about the reaction of others to your acting. Was there a moment when you were young, when you were 7 or 10 or 12, when you saw a performance either by a male or female actor on a movie or in a television show, maybe, you know, Peter Pan with Mary Martin, that kind of thing, that you said, I understand that, I can do that, was there a one specific performer or performance that struck you young?
There were a lot of them.
Yeah. Can you name 2 or 3?
What I was watching, you know, we're in rural Connecticut in the 50s, and I was in front of the TV a great deal, and we had all the old movies, and they played them in their entirety then, you know, and the TV shows, everything from The Honeymooners, which ran a gambit of emotions, to I Love Lucy, to a lot of the cowboy shows, everything. And the movies. The movies were spectacular, in my opinion. Casablanca, to Audrey Hepburn, Katharine Hepburn, you name it, the standards that I felt very, very pulled in to the movie and moved by what was going on. Old Yella, mm-hmm. You know. So I'd sit there and be mesmerized, or I'd be crying, and at a very young age, just fascinated with it. And yes, for those moments that I was watching a movie, I was in another place. I was in another experience. And that was a huge draw, the different experiences with all the different movies and all, you know, the different shows that we had back then.
I did a show last year about the lost culture of cinema in this country, and another actor I spoke to who grew up in New Jersey, a few years older than me, in his mid-50s, was talking about, as a boy, sharing the experience of movies with his dad on television, and also going to movies. Was going to movies a private thing, or was it a communal experience for you, some girlfriends, or your mother and you going together?
Mother would take us. But we were often dropped off. 7 kids, you know, that's a great window of time for the parents to just be left alone. So, and it was safe. You know, it was safe. Great theater in Torrington, Connecticut. Beautiful, the Warner Theater, with old murals on the wall. I mean, everything about going to the movie theater was magical. Between the murals on the wall, the huge red velvet curtain, people were quiet. There was an usher that if there was any noise, he'd flash a light. And you could get into a space of experience. You could experience it fully. And I feel that's sort of lost. Every now and again, I'll go to the movie theater and it'll be a tame group and people are respectful, and yes, I think, and it was wonderful because I wanted to be with people watching the show. I loved the feeling that when you laughed, other people were laughing, and you were experiencing it all together. And I think that that's a very important part of the movies that pulled me in even more. That there was a richness around me, you know, not just the actual film, but people, what they were experiencing, and you could feel that as well. So it was lovely.
How about theater? Did you ever, as a child or a teenager, go to see, you know, go to Broadway, or was there any community theater? And was that a different experience for you watching people actually act live in front of you rather than on a film or TV?
Yes, our school, actually, I remember saying, our school would do play, you know, skits. They would do skits. The older kids, and I was 4 years behind my oldest sister, and I saw her do a skit with her good friend. And they would also, it was wonderful. She was very funny. It was a short skit. And also they would have ballet companies come in and do ballet, you know, perform ballet pieces. That was mesmerizing. And then in high school, I had the opportunity to, in my freshman year, I was going to one high school, that the next year I moved to another high school. But I think Betty White, what's her name? She was a well-known actress back then in her 50s. And she would come down and direct the musicals they put on. And they were very, very professionally dubbed. We would get costumes from New York. And I remember we did Wonderful Town. That's it, right? With Rosalind Russell, you know, Wonderful Town. Oh my God, I'm blanking. Yeah, Wonderful Town.
Well, let me just say, this was not the same Betty White that's famous still and still living. This was a different
No.
name. Yeah, okay.
No, I know why, because I misquoted the name. Ruth White.
Ruth White,
Her
okay.
name was Ruth White.
Okay.
And I should have had you send me questions so I could get my little cards going. But she and her brother would come down and it would be choreographed. They were amazing shows, and their shows would they would make so much money on these performances, like 3 performances. Always not a seat in the house left. Anyway, I remember when we got our costumes, and I had auditioned. I had auditioned for the lead. It's the musical version of My Sister Eileen, right?
Okay.
Anyway, I auditioned for the lead, and people were very surprised because the same gal played the lead in every play the 4 years she was there, and for the first time someone was in after her speaking audition. There was some grumbling because all of a sudden someone else might be considered, which was myself. But then I couldn't pass the singing audition. I'm so terrified. I could sing, I can sing, but I have a real fear of of it sometimes.
Well,
I've done.
let me just ask you though, why though? If you could do acting, what's different about singing? Is it more personal?
I haven't been able to figure that out. Here's the thing: when I'm nervous, because you're nervous when you're on stage a lot of times, certainly opening night, but you can anchor into the words, and if you're really nervous, you can hide it, or you channel that energy into what you're doing. But with singing, it felt as if my lungs got punched full of holes, and I couldn't get any air, and I couldn't hold a tune, and I couldn't. Wasn't good.
Mm.
I sing great at a party,
Mm-hmm.
but when I'm being judged like that with singing, it might have changed by now. I haven't really checked it out. And then in NYU, we did Three Penny Opera, and I did Lucy Brown. But that was a process with the teacher, and I used a belt voice and this, what he called speaking on the note. And I had no problem with that. And it was a terrific experience. So it depends, It takes time to figure out all the things that don't work for you.
Well, before I go on and ask some more specific questions about acting, you're also a model. So you've sung, you've acted, done modeling. What are the difference between all of them? All of them you're in front of the camera. In modeling, one would think, an outsider, that that's the easiest thing to do because you don't have to really speak usually. You just have to stand there, wear makeup or whatnot, look pretty. But I know some people have said that sometimes that's even more difficult. Explain some of the subtle differences between these three types of things that depend on performance.
Well, certainly it's easier when you don't have lines. I don't have a photographic memory. When I have to do lines, I do I have memorization, takes a lot of work, and then the nerves will interrupt it, etc. So it is easier to model in that respect. But what I didn't expect with modeling is that you absolutely use acting, because it is a matter of focus. I'll give you an example. I just shot a few months ago, I did a Zara commercial. And I was to walk down a street, walking with a dog. And I was the only older model in the shoot. And there were several, younger girls. Not my big. They looked like they were late teens, early 20s, but I know that some of them had their fathers with them. So, and they were from all over the world. You heard French, Russian, Italian. And when it came to me to do a shot, because I'd be outside, it was all shot outside. I was watching the filming at some point, and they were taking several takes. And then it came my turn, and I had my dog and my coat and my outfit, and I walked down the street, and they said, "Good, all right, next location." They didn't say good; they said next location, and I thought, "Oh my God, I was awful." That's what I assumed. They only shot me once. And I'll fast forward. I asked one of the, you try not to look too neurotic ever, but I did find somebody who was a PA, and I said, "How did I do? Because they only shot me once." And she said, "Yeah, and they got it. You're an amazing actress." And I actress? And then another time we were shooting, other things came up. And when I left the site, I left at around 6:30, been there at 8:30 in the morning. It's a lot of work. Modeling is a lot of work. You do not just show up, get yourself all done, and take pictures. And it's a lot of work, because what I discovered when I left that shoot that day, again, they reiterated, the client came up to me and said, "You are an amazing actress. What are you in? Can I see you in something?" I said, "Well, you'd have to go to my website. I have clips from back into acting. I haven't done it yet. That was several months ago. I've since gotten an agent, but they were so over the moon about my acting. And I was going home on the train. I thought, what am I doing? And I knew fairly quickly what I was doing that I could see some of the other girls weren't doing. And that was, when you start off, even if you're just walking down the street, you're coming from somewhere, you're going somewhere, and you get your energy up before they start rolling the camera. You don't just get into the energy as you're walking, so that every moment has some background to it. There's something else going on that's going to pull a person in. And that's been my training, always. I mean, you don't just come on stage in a play. You don't just enter. You come from somewhere. And it's not, wait, you're coming from somewhere as a character. Where did you just come from? And it's working a lot in modeling, because I've been told now several times how good an actress I am. And I didn't expect that at all when I started.
Well, how much of that do you think was part of your natural makeup, and how much was that learned? Because you did study at NYU. You mentioned Uta Hagen earlier. What percentage of who you are, say, now as an actress is your natal ability, and how much was it influenced by acting teachers and subsequent jobs over the years?
All right, it's not a hard question. I don't know if I can give you, it's sort of, it's a question like, how do you stay physically fit?
Yeah.
If you don't eat right, as far as I'm concerned, you can go to the gym all you want. And if you're strengthening your muscles with the machines or doing whatever, you're not stretching, it's a package. It's a whole package. So I do feel that I was definitely born with an innate ability to act. Absolutely. But I knew by the time I left NYU after 2 years, because it was a strange time at NYU. I went from 70 to 72. There was a lot of stuff going on. It was the hippie era. I left NYU not feeling confident that I knew what to do. I did a lot of circus at NYU, learned how to juggle, do a bar-to-bar trapeze thing. The singing studies with Mark Zeller were fantastic in doing it and learning how to really approach a song. But in terms of acting, that was pretty watery. And that's why I didn't want to go back for the third year. I felt I was wasting my father's money. I didn't feel I was getting cohesive instruction on what to do and to become director, fellow actor proof, a prop breaking on stage all of a sudden. I knew that there had to be some study involved as well. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get into study with Uta Hagen the first time I went and audited her class. You were allowed to audit then for free, And there I am sitting in this class with this legendary actress. And her, two people got up and did a scene. And I knew it didn't work. But I had no idea why. No idea. I mean, my untrained brain just said, well, then they're not good actors. They're not good. And when she critiqued them, she was so spot on. She was so great. I don't have any word, but she knew exactly. She just pinpointed all this stuff. No fat in her critiques. It was all pure meat. And I thought as I sat there, I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to, not do the acting, but I'd never be able to understand. Wow, she's just amazing. So I started studying with her. And after a while, I started seeing what I started understanding the techniques, the technique of acting, and that it is learnable. So it's not necessarily that some actor isn't good. There are other factors involved.
Well, let me ask about Uta Hagen, because a lot of people, especially younger actors just getting started, probably will hear of the name. You know, names like Stanislavski, you know, the method acting, Marlon Brando, and Strasberg, and Adler. What did Uta Hagen bring, say, to the theory of acting, or what is she most known for as an acting teacher that most people would recognize?
She used to laugh because, you know, she was at the same time as all, you know, the other Stella Adlers and all that stuff. And she was very humble in that she wasn't after, she didn't want a following. She loved acting and she knew how to teach it. So there was no grandiosity around her at all. And she laughed one time when somebody said to her, "Oh, you teach the moment-to-moment method." Now, and she laughed because she laughed at how people always wanted to put a method on something, the word method. Yeah. Yes, she absolutely taught moment-to-moment. That's what's interesting to watch. But and that was the great gift, that she knew how to give you exercises so that you could understand what the moments were. And if you have good writing, you'll get to the essence of the play, you'll get to the essence of the story. But you have to stay clear and do the process every time. She was wonderful. Oh, she was brilliant.
Do most acting teachers, Hagen included, do they mostly teach for the stage, or do they break it down and say, well, if you were doing this on stage, and now if this was a feature film, or if this was, you know, a 1-hour television drama, you know, say you had similar scenes, you're breaking up with a lover or something, or do they give you sort of general principles that you can then in turn take to the different media?
Yeah, that's a great question, and she did. I mean, the base of her stuff absolutely is all-inclusive. But at the time, she wasn't dealing with camera. I mean, she did her own films, of course, but that wasn't incorporated into her technique. She stuck strictly with the stage acting. And I think I heard someone say that she would have done different things. Not the technique, but incorporated other things for when you do have to audition for a film or TV. Because we would go down there was, you know, stage area, and you could always tell the Uta Hagen students going to class from the subway over to Bank Street because they were the ones loaded down with props. And she taught that a lot, that the words come out of the action. Mm-hmm. You know, what are you doing? And it was very interesting how I found that to be very true. But when you're walking into an office with a casting director and 2 chairs and a desk and the audition, if you're not able to do it despite the lack of prop or whatever, that's a different technique. And then, of course, once you get in front of a camera, it's very important to understand that a subtle movement is very big. You know, you have to learn how to relax your face. There are different techniques for TV and film, certainly. But she didn't dress those. And she didn't have to, for my purposes, because when I went to LA, I learned that on my own and being in a cold reading class out there. that we would put ourselves on. You learn very quickly when you see yourself on video every 3 weeks. You say, oh, okay, got it. But she gave you the foundation. You could go from there.
A couple of actors that I've interviewed have talked about the fact that they think that a lot of actors today, especially, don't know how to audition properly, and they've talked about you know, that when they go to audition, that you know, you have to take it serious and whatnot. Have you found that to be so? And is there a different process in getting yourself up for an audition versus when you have it? And even if, let's say, you just have, you know, a 30-second spot on a sitcom, is there a different psychological process? Do you have to psych yourself up in a different way when you're auditioning versus when you actually have the job and have to perform, say, in front of an audience?
I would say no.
No.
I don't think it's any different. I do the same thing in an audition that I do on the job. I do my work. You know, I try to figure out, you know, where am I coming from? What am I doing? What just happened? Who am I talking to? That's very important in auditioning. You have to know who you're talking to. You know what your wants are. Now you do the same work. Now, I'm not privy to other people auditioning. I don't see what they do. I go in, you sit on a bench of people. I don't see what they do. I have no idea. About that. But if you're not respecting the audition, if you go in with an attitude that's not appropriate to the character or what you're doing, well, that's just silly, isn't it? It's disrespectful of everybody's time. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. I don't get that.
Yeah.
So I guess these other actors are involved in projects that they get to watch.
Let me ask about, you had talked about modeling and how you were complimented because you went in front of the camera and you knew where the character was coming from, even as she was just walking across a street or whatever, and then you knew where she was going. When you have an actual role, though, in acting, do you just look at the script and say, well, okay, I'm playing a woman who is a divorcee who is going to meet her aunt who's dying of breast cancer, and that's what you've got? Or do you sometimes create a more intricate backstory to give you that, before screen and then after screen moment? Or is it just what the author has written, that's what I'm working with? Or do you sort of in your mind make up more filler before and after your scenes?
Yeah, first of all, I have a huge respect for writers. I think it's very important to say their lines the way they wrote it. Now, every now and again, the process of auditioning is very stressful. You know, after you've been in rehearsal for a couple hours or weeks, you know, the lines get more natural to you. And auditioning, you might paraphrase a bit. But my intention is to go in and have those lines down the way the writer wrote them. And if you read them the way they're written, you'll have clues to what the writer's intending. Now, what's difficult about that is that you often just get a partial of the script. You may have no idea what to do. So, I do both. I try to figure out what the writer wanted. And I will fill in other things if I can so that there's life in whatever I'm doing. And if I can't get it from the description, I mean, you often just get exactly what you said. You know, 55-year-old divorcee, whatever, she's sitting with a girlfriend in a restaurant. That's all you get. So you have to get it from the lines and make something up so that when you do speak, there's something at least that's active. Then if they ask you to do it differently, this is the most important thing. They might say, okay, that's good. We'd like you to do it again, only this time do this. You have to be open to flicking that switch and going from what you were working on for yourself and go over here. Because that's what a lot of directors are looking for, and I don't blame them. You know, you want someone you can direct. And if you repeat the same thing, having been told, well, we need you to be sadder about this, and this is what's going on, and you can't do it, then that's what you need to work on. You need to work on that flexibility.
Oftentimes, actors will talk about, acting as self-expression. To what degree is affectation and artifice important in the actor's repertoire? For example, you are Jackie O'Shaughnessy, and you look like Jackie O'Shaughnessy, and if you were to play a serial killer in one role, an adorable grandmother in another one, and a district attorney in a third one, you would be required to draw different things. You might have to change your bearing or your demeanor, the way you walk, your voice, etc. Is that something that, as an actor, you look forward to, or does that sort of put you sort of on alert? Because things like improvisation sometimes can throw actors. Some actors love improvisation, where they're co-creating in a sense, and others don't. So, to what degree do things like artifice, affectation, improv throw you, or are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love doing. I love doing characters away from who I am, though I always bring aspects of me into everything. You're acting as if that were you, but given the circumstances of the character. I played a very convincing 40-year-old spinster who gets drunk in dark comedy, and I was 21. And I was very convincing. The audience loved it. So I embrace those roles. I think those are great. That being said, I also have always wanted to speak someone else's words. I like that part about acting. It's someone else's words, and that's what I love about it. Mm-hmm. Improv is necessary because things can happen. I've had a prop phone falls apart in your hand. You gotta learn how to improvise. Somebody doesn't come in on their exit. On their entrance quickly enough. You can't just all of a sudden drop out of character and stand there looking confused. So improvisation is very important. And it could be too that I just haven't been in an environment yet with a particular cast that was using a lot of improvisation. We did a lot at NYU, but improvisation is important so that you stay flexible when things go differently. Mm. But I prefer the writer's words.
Yeah,
but as I said, I may not have experienced improvisation yet the way I want to.
Earlier you had mentioned about actors being at their best or not, and so I would assume, especially on stage, you probably had some times where an actor who may otherwise have been very well or professional, for one reason or another, wasn't at the top of their game. Either they were tired, or they had some personal dilemma, or maybe they had a little too much to drink or whatnot, and maybe they're slurring their words, maybe they're forgetting some lines or forgetting to put the right emphasis on something. How do you, as an actor, compensate, especially on stage, in that very moment where everyone should be flowing in the same rhythm together, and someone else is just sort of scuttling the waves of the play?
Well, fortunately, I've been involved with very professional people. Even when I was doing off-Broadway in New York, nobody showed up drunk. There wasn't that kind of thing going on. So that would be a new experience for me. However, I have, of course, been in a play. I was in a play one time where the man playing my husband, he was just stock acting. It was so fake. But I had to be very passionately in love with him. And one fellow actress, she pulled me aside, she said, "You feel like you're pushing a boulder up the hill every night, don't you? Yeah. Yeah, but in order to get past that, because you don't want the audience to know that you're working hard to keep this up, I had to tune into other things about him that I knew of him personally.
Yeah.
To get to the level I had to be. But it's certainly a lot easier when the people you're working with are nailing it, you know. It's much easier. But yeah, you have to, you find your little tricks of adjustment and to still keep it honest.
Right.
You know,
other than other actors, how about, especially on stage with directors, or even in film or television, if I mean, there could be some directors, you know, like Alfred Hitchcock, that famously scorn actors as just parts. Other directors, like someone like a John Cassavetes, was famous for working with people and was considered an actor's director. I'm sure you probably had a whole variance there. Are you the type that if you have a director who's more conducive to your suggestions, that you'll go for it? Or do you prefer a director that's simply regimented and said, do this, do that, boom, 1, 2, 3, hit the mark, boom? Is that easier for you? What is your comfortability level at the different?
I can do either.
Yeah.
I don't mind either. A director can even give me a line reading. Fine with me. I'll make it real. That's the actor's job. Now, the only problem, and I've experienced this once, is that I was in a play and we were going all over the place with it. And, you know, different theaters, and finally we ended up on a main stage. And somehow along the way, he decided at a very important part of the play, the crescendo of my character, the arc of my character, he didn't want me to hit it. Wanted me to pull back. And I regret now having done so. I regret following his direction on that. Because a very well-known actor, you know the name. I'm obviously trying to disguise this story. Very well-known actor who had seen it in one very prestigious regional theater where we did it. And then he came to the main stage where we did it. And his comment was that the director, who was a friend of his, had gotten so fussy with the play. So he tried to be so clever that he took the heart right out of it. So yeah, that's tough. And as I look back, because you know, you get caught, as an actress, my obligation is to the writer and to the director. But if at a certain point the director is not doing it, not doing the play, yeah, that needs to be addressed. I would have gone to the writer. Had I not, I would have gone to the writer and said, look, this is what the director is telling me to do, and have a discussion about it, certainly.
Let me just ask about you have a member on your website of the 3 Actors Union SAG after an equity, which is for stage. I know I've interviewed a few of the actors who give me some stories about union work versus non-union work. Do you only do exclusively union work? And what kind of benefits has that been for you as an actor? I'll give you an example. One of the people I interviewed had been replaced in a play that she was by Patti LuPone, but it was done sort of behind her back. So she had, I guess she called it an equity trial against the producer, a famous producer, Broadway producer, and she won her case. Do you do non-union stuff, whether it's for a college film or off Broadway, or do you stick to union work, and what benefits has that been for you?
Well, I'm not up on things like doing a college film or something like that. There's a lot of waivers now with equity. You can get an equity waiver if you're doing an off Broadway. If you're doing a showcase, you can get an equity waiver. And I think that at this point, you pay the actor about $25 or something. There are waivers. You can do these things. Yeah, no, I don't do non-union things. I can't. I'm in the union. But there are waivers, so you have to make sure you know what's going on. I had a similar experience as the actress that got replaced because the same play that I was talking about eventually came to New York. And the writer had said to me, Jacky, you're coming with this show. Well, she didn't know it, but the director didn't want that. He wanted a name. And so he told her that equity wouldn't allow it. It turned out to not be true. He just fudged the whole thing. But it was after the fact, and there was nothing, So you spend a year on a play. I started that play when it was one line. I ended up being a main character, if not the main character. Though all the other actors were so brilliant in it, and everybody was so important. But when people would go to the play, they would say, yes, my character was the one you followed from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. But I spent a year with that project, year and a half, showing up as a favor. The playwright called me and said, Jacky, it's one line, but you have to do it. I said, okay. So, I would show up in downtown LA in a really rundown area, and I'd show up and say, wear one line. And then she'd only written 3 scenes. She hadn't even written the whole play yet. And then when it became a full-length play, it turned out my character was the main character, and I didn't see that coming at all. Anyway, when you spend a year and a half with a show, and you get rave reviews, and then you don't get to go to New York, that's a heartbreaker. But, happens. There are other things, other projects. You just have to know there's more on the horizon.
Do you have a preference for film, television, or stage, or for comedy, or drama, or musicals?
They're all different. There's nothing, no, they're all different. I love the theater. I love the theater, live theater, because you can feel the pulse. It's not just without an audience in the theater. The actors, what are they doing? You need the audience, and it's a connection, and you can feel it, and it becomes an experience. I love that about the theater. But there's also other satisfying things doing TV. You spend a week. There's also an audience. If it's like the night courts that I did, there were a couple of the other shows. There was an audience there. So that's, I think, that's one of the wonderful things about TV. When there's a live audience, you get a little bit of both. But there's also, and it's different. And it's different. And I enjoy all of it. I don't care if it's comedy or drama or a musical. It's all different. I like it all.
Let me talk a little bit about women in the industry in all 3 modes: film, television, stage. You mentioned that this woman who is the writer had written a part that became the main character. Do you think that there needs to be more women and more female roles, both in stage, film, and theater? And do you think, for example, that most of the time the roles for females are written by men, and there's a falseness to it? And the reason I ask is, having talked to a number of women, I said the difference that I see, for example, when I watch foreign films versus American films, the women in foreign films are fully developed beings. They think about things other than reproduction. They think about other things than makeup. They'll think of existential things. Why am I here? Am I a good person? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas in America, women seem to serve a purpose, as I said a couple of times, as sort of vaginas with accoutrements, that they're around for the men, that they are sex objects. They have to look good. And if we want to have drama, either the woman is infertile or she's sexually assaulted. What do you think about women as portrayed in American theater, film, and television overall?
Yeah, we could use a lot of improvement here in the States. I think we are still very much relegated to a certain lack of level, shallow level, doesn't go very deep. And I agree. I love watching foreign movies and TV shows. Everything here is still, it's so formulaic still.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only how deep the character goes or doesn't go. It has to do with, it gets even worse than that. It has to do with age.
Mm-hmm.
What age the girl is at or the woman is at. Whatever age she is. Oh, well, then this is the only thing that can be happening here. And it has to look a certain way. This is a small, but in my life, big example is one's height. I auditioned for a play back on Broadway back when I was in my late 20s. And it was Crimes of the Heart. And the director basically said I was too tall because I thought, oh, finally, 3 sisters. My height's not going to matter. It's 3 sisters. And the director said, apparently the feedback was, well, she's too tall. And I said, to play a sister? Yeah, she said, we need them to all look like they're related. And I'm 6 feet tall. And she said, you're 6 feet, and the other actresses are around 5'6", 5'5". And I said, well, good, I'll go home and tell my sister that one of my sisters who's 5'6", I'm going to go home and tell her I can't be your sister anymore. I'm too tall. You're too short. It's not going to work. So the formula is not only for women and what they're relegated to be, and that the men are the ones that get flushed out their character. It's also homogenized across the board in terms of, the husband's always taller than the wife, It's so boring. And, you have to look to foreign stuff sometimes to just get some real variation to the fabric.
Yeah.
And, but the thing, we have more women writers now. We have more women directors. We have more women producers. And we just need even more, and it's up to women, I think, to start writing more. But I can't speak as an expert on this because I don't know what it's like to be dealing with producers, how to get money. I don't know, but it needs to change.
Yeah, I know. I've always found it odd when so many films in the last 20 plus years have become, films are geared towards the teenage mindset, these superhero kind of stuff. And but also, too, I wanted to talk about looksism. Now, you're obviously still a very attractive woman. And certainly when you were younger, I'm sure you probably got offered more roles as, the pretty girlfriend or something rather than a substantive thing. A few months ago, there was Charlize Theron, the actress, had tweeted, I guess, that she felt that she didn't get good roles because she was too attractive. And another actress whose name slips my mind, but who was in a film called Welcome to the Dollhouse 20 years ago, played a child. Now she's in her early 30s, was famously tweeted, it was a big Twitter war or something, that she was told that she wasn't fuckable enough to be a lead in a film. And so you had one person complaining that you don't get substantive roles if you're very attractive, and the other one is you don't get any roles if you're not attractive enough, especially in a woman. Now, to a certain extent, this is true with men. Philip Seymour Hoffman, before he died, was never going to get Robert Redford roles, but he could still, play, a character of some worth. What is that? You think an example of sexism where you have basically both ends of the spectrum talking about something in the middle, and could that be solved more with the idea that, okay, we have females and there are going to be all sorts of them, but we only see, sort of the babe in heels kind of character.
Well, I've been watching a lot of Netflix since last year.
Yeah.
And catching up on things because I never did that. And I'm very impressed with. I just finished watching Saving Grace with Holly Hunter, and that show was terrific. Terrific. I think she was in her late 40s when she actually did the show. Maybe 42. I don't know, but she wasn't. She was in her 40s, and she was all over the place, and they gave her so many different levels and experiences. It was fantastic, and so was the rest of the show. You had a lot of diversity, and I'm seeing this more and more. But when I was a kid, my biggest problem in my 20s. What I was told all the time, every time, you're too tall. It wasn't until I would get stage work in New York, off Broadway. But I moved out to LA when I was 37 because I wasn't getting anywhere. I didn't have an agent. Everything I got was through backstage or word of mouth. And so I moved to LA, and I was ready to quit. 37, still can't get an agent. How long am I going to hit my head against the wall? It just won't break down for me. So I said, okay, you've been working 10 jobs, you don't have any savings, you're going to have to give up acting. That's what I figured. But I couldn't do it until I said, you got to go to LA to myself. You got to go to LA for a year or two so that you can say you tried everything. So I did this huge mailing of just a postcard of my face that I was looking for an agent. I don't know how many I sent, maybe 200. And I was so surprised. I'd done mailings in New York for years. Never got a call. Not once. I got a call from 2 agents that wanted to see me once I got to LA. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So maybe something will happen. I got out there. And I went to my first audition for Moonlighting. So I got my co-star on Moonlighting. And the person I auditioned with was shorter than I. And the casting director said, don't worry about it. Just take your shoes off. Don't worry about it. They didn't care at all. They didn't care at all. I felt that I went from this very locked town to this completely open town of, yeah, sure, doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. And I started getting work. And it was, the height thing didn't seem to matter anymore. Didn't matter. Especially doing, I was also doing shows with very tall actors. But even when they weren't tall, it didn't, that whole issue was gone. Well, until I did this play out there and I got rave reviews, and I so wanted to get a powerful agent. Because my agent was a sweetheart, but I wasn't moving on to the next level. Mm-hmm. I needed to do that. And he understood. It wasn't like I was doing one of those things of, where you desert the person that has helped you get where you're going. And where was I?
You were leaving the agent.
Yeah, and that's not the point.
You hadn't deserted the first agent, and you wanted to move up to another level.
But before where it's going with that, I care about anyway, I started to get roles with tall people, and it was oh, I know what I was going to say is that, but I wanted a more powerful Asian, right? So I did this play out in LA that was very, very well received. I got rave reviews, and there were fellow actors that had very strong agents, very strong. And the actors were so generous. Two of them recommended me to their agency. And I thought, finally, I'm going to get that agent that's going to get me, I wanted to do film. I wanted to progress. And both agents said, no, we can't rep her. She's too tall. And my reaction was, really? Really? Still? I was blown away by it. Blown away.
Is that one of the reasons, though, that you've done modeling? I mean, I would assume, because you're tall, Caucasian, fair-looking, that it's easier because, modeling, they want everyone to be 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot, for the models, so is it more advantageous, your height, in modeling versus acting?
Well, it's advantageous in two ways. One is the way clothes look on you at 6 feet or 5'10" or whatever, as opposed to someone who's 5'3". They're just going to look different, and not that shorter women can't model. I'm not going to say that at all. That's not my place, and I don't have any opinions about it. It's just that, if you're wearing a flowy outfit, it's going to flow more on a tall woman, and I think the designers have the right to decide what look they want, what body type they want their designs on. I think that's just fair. And I don't want to get into the whole discussion about plus size models, whatever. Everybody's breaking into new areas, and it's terrific. But yeah, being tall is helpful. I don't know about being, Caucasian, whether that's an issue or not, because I just did my first New York Fashion Week a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I walked for the designer's tome, and boy, it was very diverse. There were less white girls there than there were black girls. Very diverse. We had a transgender. We had a plus size model. I was there representing the older women. So I think everything's starting to branch out a lot more. Did I answer your question? I don't
Yes.
think I did.
I wanted to follow up. I had talked with a fellow. I've interviewed several character actors and actresses, and that's usually a term applied to someone who doesn't have the Robert Redford good looks, or doesn't look like Halle Berry or Catherine Zeta-Jones. And one fellow I interviewed, a guy named Paul Parducci, said, well, you have to basically take what you get, because he's a big, tough-looking guy. He looks like he was a boxer. He looks like, a thug from a Scorsese film. And he said, well, I don't get many offers for neurosurgeons. But he says, what's a disadvantageous there is advantageous if he's going to get a part as, thug number 3 in the gang. And so do you take that approach philosophically that, okay, my height is a disadvantage and I'm not going to be able to do, a love scene with Dustin Hoffman, say, if you were doing the film, because you tower over him. But by the same token, you could, it would give you advantages in other aspects.
I think that's true. I think that's just a lesson in life, to accept what's being presented to you and going as far as you can with it. I'd much rather to do, let's say, even a cliched role, because you can make it your own and make it personal somehow. I mean, it has to be. It's not going to be interesting to watch.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Let me ask you about that, because I know as a writer, and I get young people writing to me, and my website's quite popular, about cliches. And in writing, I say cliches are always pretty much the worst thing. If you read a poem or you read a short story or whatnot, There's, you know, the actual verbal cliches like a bleeding heart, and then there's the character tropes that, you know, 3 pages in how the novella of 50 pages is going to end. But you just said that you find it interesting because does getting a role like you know, sassy New York broad give you more freedom, do you think, because you can make your sassy New York broad different than, say, if you were, say, in a Cassavetes film back in his heyday, where he's very specific and you're crafting something unique, or is it just a different kind of freedom that you have?
I think that my main objective as an actress, you know, I'm probably repeating myself, but is to, yeah, freedom is nice. Sure, freedom is great, but if I have a restricted amount that I can do according to the director, it's usually the director and the writer. Sometimes I'm not sure. If I'm restricted, I have a lot of freedom within that restriction too. In terms of my own identification with what they've given me, then you make that restriction. That's who they are. That's who they are. You know, a lot of people. There are a lot of people that want to run more of a gamut emotionally. You know, they want to go wherever they want to go, add something to it all the time. And I try to find the full life of something, even when it's restricted, from the actor's point of view. You know, you might say, yeah, you know, you can give this actor more to do. You can give the character more of an arc, but I'm not concerned with that, because whatever I'm given, I feel you can take it all the way anyway. Did that make any sense?
Yes. How would you judge then a character or a script? I mean, you may get if I don't know, do you get a full script and you say, oh boy, this is a bad film, but this character is the best character in the film, or vice versa? You might have a crappy character or a minor character, but you think the film is real good, you know? Or does each film present its own criteria? Or, you know, each role offered?
You know, I'm going to come out with a cliche. Here we go. There are no small parts, only small actors. And I think that that's true. I don't care if you have one line. You don't have to be, it doesn't have to be unlimited. I see it all the time. I see it all the time in shows. I'm always amazed by that one line or two lines, a character in a movie or a show that it just, all of a sudden it just popped. And it popped because that person playing, you know, who had that one line to say, didn't think it was small. They had a reason for saying what they said. They're not standing there moments before the camera turns on them saying, geez, why am I only doing one line? You know, there's not that attitude. Because that's not what people do in real life. You know? And that's what you want to do. You want to keep it real.
Yeah. Yeah. Another actor had said that something to the effect that that person may be a background character in whatever role they are here, but there's a separate role where they're the star and their movie goes off. You know.
This is I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I find the most distracting in TV shows, sometimes in movies, is how bad the extras are. No offense, extras. No offense. But you can tell someone was just told, okay, walk from here to there. And that's what they're doing. They're walking from here to there. Downton Abbey. I love Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought was terrific about Downton Abbey is that even the background players were terrific.
Mm-hmm.
They had a place to go. You believed they were who they were. Whereas, how many times I've seen a TV show or a movie where there's the extra walking behind, and I don't buy it at all. And this is another pet peeve of mine. You've got a couple talking in a restaurant, and then you've got the couples throughout the restaurant, and then you see the couple where the guy or the woman is just all over the place with trying to have their day in the sun and maybe get noticed. Yeah. As a director, I would have a meeting with all of them beforehand and say, look, you blend in, okay? You do that, and you're doing a great job. That's what I need you to do.
Yeah. Sort of the reverse of that, I know, is that, I'll give you an example. I've always been a fan of an actress named Megan Follows. She was on, back when she was a teenager, she did Anne of Green Gables in Canada. And I've seen her in virtually so many things, in movies, when she was a child actress, and now she's in her late 40s, and she's on a show on the CW called Reign, where it's set 4 or 5 centuries ago, and she's the Queen of France or something. And basically, it's a bodice-ripping show where you have a lot of hot, young 20-somethings basically screwing around in medieval times. But every time that Follows comes on the show, it turns serious, and you can see she's such a commanding presence because she's so much better an actor than these, and nothing against the young studly guys or the young hot babes, but you can see that this borderline farcical kind of show that's basically an excuse to see a lot of young hot medieval bodies. When this actress Megan Follows comes on, she commands. I mean, she is so much above the rest of the actors. It sort of stands out, but it shows how a good actor can be dedicated to something, and that even if you have a lot of silly, trite nonsense, a good actor can put that over. And I just sometimes when I don't watch the show regularly, but as I flip channels here and there, and I see something, and if she's on in that 2 or 3 minute segment, she commands it, and it makes you wonder, what if all actors had that ability and that desire to give it all? Like you said, it seems some actors either don't really care as much, or they're just trying to, gesticulate so much to gain attention.
Yeah. Yeah. See, it goes back to training. I mean, and it goes back to, I think, a philosophy of acting. Yeah. What kind of actor do you want to be? Yeah. I mean, some people are perfectly fine with that, going to the gym, getting their bodies ripped, and that's all they do. They're happy with that. That's fine. But there are a lot of actors, and I've heard guys complain about it as well as women, that they just didn't want to be a piece of beefcake up there. Yeah. But that's the job they had. That's what they had to do until they could either get enough, credits together to branch off and do the things they really care about. But it's, it exists. But I think you can have a great body and have your clothes half off and still be riveting if you have the depth you need or the understanding of acting. If you know how to flesh out a character. Yeah. I don't think there's any reason not to be interesting. Yeah. And that's what Megan, her name is?
Megan Follows.
What is it?
Megan Follows.
Yeah, I'll be looking her up and writing it down. That's what she's coming in with. Yeah. She's coming in with that richness. And you know what the interesting thing is, too? One technique or one attitude toward acting that I fully ascribe to is that you never give them everything. You don't show everything. Yeah. If you get enraged about something and you lose it, you should still be trying to control it on some level, except for the very rarest occasion. What I feel a lot of times with some of these actors that are pretty much just, stripped down or whatever. That's all. That's it. They're giving, they don't realize that that's it. Here's the physical presentation and maybe some whatever, but they don't realize they can make it so much fuller.
Yeah.
And much more interesting.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I would call that connotation in that I know when in writing, as I said, I'm a writer, and young people ask me, and I think one of the things that's wrong with, for example, MFA creative writing programs is they're always asking to tell, describe, describe, describe. My wife a year or so ago told me when she had read the book Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier, which was a bestseller 20-some years ago, she said he went into like a 5-page description of a gun handle or whatnot, and it didn't serve any purpose. It didn't come out anywhere else. And I always say, you only have to tell what's necessary because the human mind will fill in the blanks. For example, if you are writing about a particular, well, let me give you an example. We both, if I just say Marilyn Monroe, we have that iconic idea of what she looks like. But imagine you came from Burma and had never heard of Marilyn Monroe, and I wrote 10,000 words describing Marilyn Monroe, even down to the slight little dimple or a mole she had on part of her cheek. Yeah. No matter how well I'm a writer, your Marilyn Monroe is going to look different from the Marilyn Monroe that I have read from that. And just as your Huckleberry Finn is different than my Huck Finn, your Ahab is different from my Ahab. And so there's a certain sense that where words fail, and that's where the connotation comes in. And that sounds like what you're saying with the acting is you don't have to give everything. You give enough out there for the audience, and the audience can fill in the blanks about that character.
Absolutely. It's much more interesting. Here you go. There's a wonderful example, and I wish I knew the director. I've been trying to find. I read this quite a while ago of this actress. She wrote this in her book, and she was a film actress back in the 40s and 50s, and she was talking about how working with this one director, she was supposed to cry. And she worked on it, she worked herself into a lather and cried. And she was so happy, and she felt she had done such a good job. And the director said, well, no, we need to do it again. And she said, well, again, but I cried. He said, yes, dear, I know, but you didn't make me cry. Mm-hmm. And that was because, and what I feel happens is that what pulls out tears is when you're watching some, no matter how dramatic the crying is, they're trying not to. Some part of them is trying, they're trying to, that's the action, is trying not to cry, and they cry anyway. That's what's pulling. But if you've got people just crying and, getting angry, anger is one of the, this is a little bit of a segue, but I remember back when I auditioned at NYU, and, the acting teachers, I forget how it came up, but that so often a person will choose an audition piece where they get angry. Or it's angry. And why? Because anger is the easiest thing to get to. And the auditioners would say, oh, it's one angry piece after the you got these 18-year-olds coming in and doing some really hard, angry thing. And I don't know, that's a bit of a segue, but you don't show it all. Acting shouldn't be about.
Well, it's demo reel kind of acting. It's what they send to the Oscars or the Emmy thing. It's easy if you're doing a scene where your mother's dying in a hospital, or your girlfriend's been raped, or something like that. But to me, I've always said this, and I said this to a number of actors, I look for those small scenes in between the crescendos where the actors, maybe after they've visited, their wife has had a double mastectomy, they think they're going to die, and the guy goes to a bar and he's talking to the bartender. and it's a 3 minute scene in between the scenes, whether she's going to die or not. But that's when you see whether the guy is really a good actor, because it is easier, I think, to cry, to get that emotion, but to get that exasperation where the character is speaking what he or she really feels to a stranger. That's to me the more important part.
Exactly. How are they managing to stay in control while they're losing control is a lot more interesting than watch someone lose control.
Yeah. Well, let me end this segment, and then we'll talk about some of the roles that you've done. But I want to just ask about the sacrifices that an actor makes. And I don't know much about your personal life. You don't have it on there. I don't know if you're married or have had children or whatnot. Are there sacrifices that you've made to have a career in modeling and acting or whatnot? And to what degree do you sort of regret some things that you may have done, choices you may have made, or not?
Well, I'm not married, never been married, and I have no children. And that's fine. I don't rule out marriage. It just hasn't happened. It was not something I wanted to. That was not going to be. Here's a little detail of my life. My mother said that I never started off with mama or dada or boo-boo. She said you never uttered a sound.
Yeah.
Until one day you just kind of grabbed the netting on the playpen and you pulled yourself up and you looked at me and you just said, I'm never getting married. That was my first sentence. Yeah. First word, everything. So clearly I had other things. Not that, you know, and I love being in a relationship. I love being with a guy and having all the marvelous stuff, but none of it has turned out to be marriage material as yet. You never know. Sacrificing to be an actress. I worked very hard. I mean, I always had 9-to-5 jobs that, you know, your brain just sort of leaked out of your nose. You were just so bored. But and because I wanted to be free to go on auditions. Yeah. I was always paid the least amount. Yeah. I mean, if I could go back again, sure. I mean, hindsight, I would have gotten a job with holidays and pension and all that stuff. But I thought I had to just keep my day job until something happened. So that would be the only regret. I think that if you want to be an actor, you can be financially smart. There's no need to not be making a comfortable future for yourself. But don't, you know, that's one regret I have.
And somewhere in the background, another drama's going with that ambulance or cop car behind you was going. Someone is in peril or distress.
Yeah, New York City.
Yeah. Well, let's end this segment. In the next segment, I want to talk more about some of your roles and any anecdotes you may have for that, and we'll do that in a moment. I've been speaking with actress Jacky O'Shaughnessy about acting. We're going to talk a little bit about her career, and for anyone who wants to know, I will link to her website, JacquelineO'Shaughnessy.com, below, so you can look up her information. And it's odd, I don't see that IMDb only has an appearance. I guess you were interviewed on Entertainment Tonight, so I'm looking at a listing of some of your roles from your website. Let me talk about the theater roles. We've mentioned you're studying at NYU and training with Uta Hagen. What was the first stage role that you got, and when was it?
I think the first stage role I got cast in a summer theater program out in Michigan, and the first role I had was Springtime for Henry, which I played one of the wives. I don't remember the character. I think it's on my resume. I'm not sure. I always have to look it up. And I got to play out there. That's when I did the Old Spinster in dark comedy, and I did Come Blow Your Horn, play Connie in Come Blow Your Horn, and then Letitia in Meth Dracula. So those are my first roles. No, before that, before that, my first real role, I have to say, was NYU when I did Lucy Brown. You know, we did the entire musical of Three Penny Opera, and that was my first, you know, beginning to end role.
So,
just doing rather than just doing scenes.
So when you got out of college, were you mostly doing theater in New York to start?
Yeah, all I did was, well, right out of college, I got the Michigan gig, did 4 plays out there. Then I came back to New York and did several off-Broadway plays. Separate Tables, Miss Cooper and Separate Tables. A premiere of a original script called American Flu, where I played the lead in that. A few things that would take up too much time for me to try and remember. But and then you know, 20 years later, in where was I? 87, I moved to LA, and I started getting roles out there in television.
Mm-hmm. So, did you also do theater in LA? And what was the difference between the New York off-Broadway kind of roles and roles on theater, at least in LA, if you had gotten any?
I didn't see any difference.
No.
There are so many talented people in this world, and I was fortunate enough. I did a series of plays by Debbie Curl called Sex, a ganglia of plays. That was great. I got to work with some great people there. I did Lisa Loomer's The Waiting Room, which we did at the Mark Taper Forum. Got to work with, Kurt Fuller, Bob Picardo, Simon Templeton, Leah Ivy, June Kyokolu, just wonderful people. And I didn't see any difference. People who weren't doing a good job, you can tell that just as easily in LA as you can in New York. There's no difference. The only difference, and here there's a snobbery about being a New York actor is better. In the play that I was going to go to New York with, and then I got replaced by another actress who was at the time had something that her name was prominent at the time. The writer told me that she said at one point, "Well, now we'll see how a New York actress does this role." Really, I am a New York actress. If you want to get down to snobbery. And then it turned out that at the end of the play, the line was supposed to be "Good night, forgiveness from heaven, sweet dreams," because her friend had just died. Her name was Forgiveness from Heaven. Her friend had just died, and it was very dramatic. It was very sad. And all that character said was "Good night, forgiveness from heaven, sweet dreams." And then I would lay back down in my hospital bed, close my eyes. This actress wanted to say, "You go, girl." She wanted to change that line to "You go, girl." Yeah, well. So I don't see any difference. It's either good acting or it's bad acting. And the actors out in LA are very dedicated, just as professional. Yeah.
Well, what was, I guess, the most prominent role you had, and what on stage, and what was the role, for example, that you thought was the best role, if they were indeed different?
Well, for stage,
yeah,
bar none, whether New York or LA, was Lisa Loomer's The Waiting Room, where I played Rhonda. And that's the kind of role you're just blessed when you get it. She was, she went from being all about getting a boob job and her nose fixed, and she was just all about getting on the Oprah Winfrey show, and then she gets breast cancer. And you watch her deal with that, and But she goes from being a seemingly shallow person to having a complete epiphany about what's important in life. And you see her strength come from, you see her grow and become strong and start owning her body. And it was very moving to many people. I mean, people were overwhelmed by it. Not just my role, because there are two other characters in that play, brilliantly played. The premise was that there were three women who had come to the doctor's office. It's called the waiting room, and they're in the waiting room. And one was from, I don't know, 200 years ago, ancient China. Her problem was that she was getting gangrene from foot binding, so that was her problem. Then there was Victoria, who was from the Victorian era, and she was very disturbed about her marriage life, but she didn't realize it. And the way that women were treated for hysteria was to have their ovaries out. And Victoria was convinced this would fix her problem. And then there was me. And the three of us would commune in the waiting room and try to relate to each other. And it was a very moving play. Kind of thing you don't get to do very often.
Well, when you got to LA, was it easier to get work as, say, small film roles, or was television easier to get into?
Well, I happened to get television. I think television at the time was a lot easier to get into than it is now. All the co-star roles, the guest star roles, the co-star roles are you see, they're played by stars, already established stars are playing the guest star and co-star roles. Everybody has to be a recognizable face. I was very lucky because, I did you asked what are my favorite TV appearance. Well, there were two. But my favorite, it edges it out just a little bit, was working with John Larroquette in Night Court.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of great actors, I'd love to interview him, too.
And generous.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, and he was also a lesson in he'd been nominated at that time, 6 times? Yeah. He'd won 5 Emmys for Best Actor in a comedy. And I remember that was, other than my very first time on the camera was Moonlighting. But it was about 3 lines of maybe 3 words each.
Yeah.
They shot it through the back of my head. I didn't know it at the time. It was a 3-camera thing, so I thought I was actually being seen. But that's okay. I got my credit. I got, the person I was talking to was Bruce Willis, and so that was that was great. It was great what it was, and I got to be in my own trailer, and I got to do makeup. And, it was a good entry thing because it might have been very overwhelming. Who knows? But then the next thing I got cast in was Night Court with John.
Yeah.
Doing the big scene. I ended up being in 3 different episodes of Night Court.
Well, were you one of the women he eternally lusted after?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you can see that on my website. I have a clip from that.
Yeah.
Of him coming on to me at a ha-ha group, which I was a member of a ha-ha group, and that was Happy Adults, Happy Alone. And he comes on to me and does this whole thing, and we're hugging, and he's, we're at a point. And then it turns out that, we make it, and he said, well, what do you do? Maybe we could get together sometime. And I say, oh, no, that's my improv for lovers group. He's getting, okay. And then what about that? And that sexual improv group. A couple of things that I mentioned, and he said, okay, we have to have a date. So we scheduled the date, and he said, and I said, well, you know, don't be mad at me if I'm just a little bit late. And he says, oh, you know, how can I ever be mad at you? And it turned out I have an appointment with my parole officer. And then it turns out she had shot an ex for rejecting. I have a teensy problem with rejection. And Larry Cat was, first of all, he was so good to me because I wasn't very good with camera yet in terms of I didn't know where to go. And he would turn me. He steered me physically, knowing what I needed to have. That's pro.
Yeah.
And I will be forever grateful to him. But what I also saw backstage when we were, because we were having some rehearsal, but even before he went on the night of, the night we were the camera, when we filmed it, there was a lot of area backstage, old sets, or other sets that and I saw him off in the distance, in the dark, rehearsing his lines. He wasn't sitting around, I got it, I know what I'm doing. No. He was doing his prep. And we're talking 6 years. And he was still doing his prep. He was still doing the work. And I was so impressed with that.
Yeah, well, that's one show where your height wouldn't have mattered, because I think he and Harry Anderson was 6'4", and Richard Mole is like 6'7", 6'8".
Yeah, well, Harry's 6'6", I think. John's 6'4". He was, and Harry was taller, and yeah, they were so wonderfully tall.
You spoke about Laura Ketz guiding you and whatnot. How rare is that? And the reason I ask is I spoke with a character actor named Basil Hoffman, and he told me that he had done a Columbo back in the 70s, and they had to reshoot, an on-camera, him saying some lines, to just a close-up. And he said that what impressed him the most about Peter Falk, who played Columbo, was that he's the big star of the show, and he stayed like an hour extra to get all the stuff done. And he said to Hoffman, he says, do you want me to feed you the lines? And whereas anyone could feed him the offstage lines. And he said that's one of the things. Hoffman used the term that there are some actors who are TV stars who won't do that, and then there are the real actors who will help a fellow actor.
Absolutely.
You don't have to name any names. Have you ever run into some people who have some of those ego problems?
Oh, yeah, one stood out.
Yeah.
One stood out.
Without naming a name, can you just sort of give the sort of...
I can, absolutely, and of course without naming names. But I was doing another sitcom, and there was a guy, an actor, who was the lead, and a female actress who was the lead. She was wonderful. She was very sweet. But the tenor on the set was so different from Night Court. I believe I went from Night Court to this set, and I walked in, so excited to be doing another show. And this guy, when I came out with, this was in rehearsal, when I came out with my first line, which was a seductive line, like, Johnny, where are you? I'm ready for you, or something. And he said to the director, is she going to say her line like that? And, I was stunned. And, that's a shitty thing to do to anybody. If you're concerned, same show, mind you. And I had a hint of it before we even started, because I went to I got the audition, I was put on tape, and I showed up. I was supposed to be beautiful, and I was in a suit, and my hair was done, and full makeup, and all that stuff. I show up for the table read on Monday, and I don't have makeup on. I'm in my jeans. My approach was the same as Night Court. We all showed up at Night Court. We were all in our jeans. You didn't have one diva on that set of Night Court. So I showed up in my jeans with no makeup, and I got a call from my agent that afternoon. He said, "Jacky, how did you go into the table read? Did you have makeup on? Did you have your hair done?" I said, "Well, my hair was clean, but no, I didn't have on makeup, or I was just in my jeans." He said, "Well, so-and-so doesn't think you're beautiful enough to be seen on screen with him." He said, "They haven't fired you yet, but you go in tomorrow and you go in every day this week. You got to be done." So I went in, even for rehearsals. I had on heels and a skirt, and my hair all done, and my makeup on. And then in rehearsal, I get, is she going to say her line like that? Now, he was not well liked. I'd heard stories later from other people that had worked with him. I had dinner with a girlfriend of mine, and she had worked with him, and she said, "Oh, I hate so-and-so." I said, "Yeah, he was not good to work with." The show didn't last very long. And you know, let's give him credit. I did read in an interview later where he admitted that he'd been quite a jerk back in the day. But still, you know, it became, and I didn't like the work I did in it, quite honestly. I ended up not liking what I did. I was so nervous and thrown, and I didn't have, you can't go to a director. If you're just a guest or a co-star at the time, you couldn't go and say, "Help me out here. What do you want me to do?" They don't give you any direction. They don't give you any direction.
Yeah. Well, is that a failure, do you think, of the director of the show, or is the star there just so powerful, perhaps, that, you know, they have more clout that, you know, directors just brought in to direct that particular episode, maybe a handful of episodes in a season?
Well, that's true. I mean, the directors did switch off, but you know, I wish more directors knew about acting. I did another show that it ended up being all right, but I did a show where I was supposed to be very dumb and funny, and the female star of that show, just before we were taping, I'd been doing it this way for 2 days, right? Doing what I'd done in the audition that got me the job. And the director came up to me and said, "Well, the producers have seen what you're doing and they don't like it. You need to be more serious, whatever." I mean, and you know, that's what I'm talking about. You've got to be ready to switch. You got to be ready to change horses in midstream. So I thought, okay, all right, and so I switched it up. And the lead on that TV show, she says to me backstage, "What happened to all that other stuff you were doing that was so funny?" And I said, "I was told," and I told her what, she said, "Ugh." And she mentioned the director's name, like, "Ugh." And she said, "You shouldn't listen to him." I said, "You can do that." And she smiled. She said, "Yeah, right, and you can."
Yeah.
I said, "No, I can't. I got to give him what he wants here." Because even if he's making it up, you know, a lot of times they'll blame it on a producer. So no, they just want it. So I switched up, and it wasn't as, I was very happy with what I found other things to do. Actually, it was fine. It was fine. But on the other show where I was criticized so badly, I was too panicked. I wasn't free enough to come up with something else to do. I mean, that's the problem. You know, your brain starts to scramble because you're just. But that's experience. Yeah. If that were to happen again, I wouldn't let anyone get to me like that. But it's very new at it.
Yeah, I've watched sometimes interviews with stars on the METVLegends.org or whatever, you know, the Academy of Television. And I saw a director, his name is Peter Bonas. He played the dentist on the Bob Newhart show back in the 70s, the original Bob Newhart show.
Yes.
Yeah, Jerry. And so he's been a director now for 30 or 40 years, and he's directed many shows. And he was saying that he's always found that the difference between television directors and film directors, you know, the film director, sort of like the Hitchcock, is the dictator, the emperor of the set. But a television director, he says that if you have a good cast like you do, like on Bob Newhart or Mary Tyler Moore's old show, or Cheers, and you know, or a Night Court, where you have a lot of really good actors and professionals, that you just have to stay out of their way and let them do what they have to do. So it sounds to me that there are some sets, though, where you sometimes maybe don't have people who are, they may be talented actors, but aren't professional enough, and that can sometimes sabotage the show. Do you think that's an issue?
Well, in my experience, that one experience, yeah. I mean, they were all good actors in all the shows that I did, but there was a hierarchy. And, you know, and also you have to realize that when people have been working together for a while, they know how to work with each other. If you watch the very first episodes of some very popular shows,
yeah,
the first number of episodes, things didn't quite get rolling, like Seinfeld.
Yeah.
I mean, wonderful. Oh my God, that cast interaction and all brilliant characterizations. But in the very, very early days, you know, the flower hadn't quite opened up completely.
Yeah.
And so there's a great deal, there's an advantage to that. So when you know, you're the new kid in class for the day, you need to, that's why it's important to familiarize yourself with the show.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah.
I knew Night Court.
Yeah.
So I knew what the energy had to be. I knew they were over the top, but you still have to be believable.
Yeah.
But I knew what it needed to be. And that's very important. But I think one of the problems, and I've worked with directors with, you know, small, you know, I've worked with a film director one time. And that wasn't all that fun. He just kept saying, I can see the acting. And then I thought, really? Because I usually, you know, I know when, I had a friend come to a play rehearsal one time because we were getting close, the waiting room, we were getting close to, and I had never been on that big a stage, not that big a show, you know, I don't know, 700 people, times what's going to be there, everything. And my friend Peter came along, and he was an actor, and to watch rehearsals. And after, as we were getting closer, I said, how's it going? He said, you've stopped listening. And I said, no, I haven't. And then I took a breath and said, okay, come on. And I realized he was right. I wasn't purely listening, which is very important if you're going to be moment to moment and you're going to be real. I'd stopped listening because the director had us moving our own chairs or, you know, our own scenery on, and there was a lot going on in my head. And that was gold that Peter was there to tell me that, because I could have fallen into that thinking I was still listening because I was nervous. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't listening at all, but to really be purely listening is when I think you get the richest performance. So back to this movie director, he telling me I can see the acting. I thought, I don't feel it, but okay. And then a girlfriend of mine did a movie with him, and she had a major character. And she said, and she was brilliant. She was wonderful. And she said he told me the same thing. He tells all the stars that they're brilliant. And then he goes up to all the people with the smaller roles and says, I can see the acting.
Yeah.
You know, but he became a director. He had been a DP. He'd been a director of photography for years. and then he lucks out and gets to direct, and it happens to be a big success because, yeah, sometimes you can pull everybody together, and nobody needs to be directed. Everybody does their job, and it just works. But that doesn't always happen. Even there's a story about Paul Newman, where the director came up to him in his early days and said, "The scene's taking too long. It's taking too long." And so Paul went off and said that he really thought about it, and he realized he just wasn't in the scene enough. He wasn't present enough. And the lesson was that they reshot. The director was thrilled, and the scene was actually longer.
Mm-hmm.
But because he wasn't present and doing it,
yeah,
it seemed too long.
Yeah. That's sort of what an actor can do. Is a good actor, a great actor, you're so into their watching them that subjective time sort of flees, and so you can have a great actor, like for example, I mentioned another guy I talked to was telling me some anecdotes about Jason Robards. If you ever watched Jason Robards on film, or if you got to see him on some stage stuff on PBS, you can watch Robards, and he can just sit there and fart for 10 minutes, and it'll be interesting. You get an actor who's just, you know, coming up, maybe then they could be a good actor someday, but they haven't mastered their skills, and their 30 seconds can seem like War and Peace, you know, watching them.
There you go.
Well, let me, you know, it's interesting too. The first actor that I interviewed was a woman named Karen Austin, who was on the first season of Night Court, and you were mentioning about how it takes time to develop. And if you watch that first year and first couple of years, a couple of the actresses had died there. They changed the Lara Kett character from sort of being a snooty upper crust Republican type to being this lecherous character, and it's sort of like. You can always often see that the evolution of characters. It's always interesting. But let me talk about some of the film roles, because you have listed. I don't know if you have a more extensive list, but you have 4 films listed on your resume page, and it looks like you did a couple of the Addams Family movies back in the 1990s. That looks like, I guess, the most probably financially successful films that you were in. Now that's obviously an over-the-top kind of wacky role. When you do something like that, that's clearly, you know, not something that's necessarily you're going to hold to your bed. Oh, I was, you know, it's not like doing Lillian Hellman or something. When you approach a role like in a film like that, is that, do you go and looking for that this is going to be fun? And do sometimes those roles, are they the most kind of aggravating if you have a role where you're supposed, I don't know whether you played a ghoul or a spook or just someone spooked by the Addamses. What is the difference between expectation in film acting generally and what you actually get on set?
Yeah. I don't know that film is any different from TV. I really don't. I mean, you always have expectations. I don't have an answer for that. My experience is there was no difference between TV and film. Probably because it could. Well, you know, I did 2 independent films. I did a couple of them actually.
Well, I see one called Marble Falls. I live out here in Central Texas. Was that based in Marble Falls, Texas?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you actually shoot out in Marble Falls?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we were in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
We were in Arizona.
Okay.
For that. But there was Might As Well Live, which was a short written by Peter Barnes, who wrote The Ruling Class. Do you remember that film with Peter O'Toole? The Ruling Class.
I remember the film and the name. I can't visually bring it up, but
he wrote a wonderful. It with the film, and I have a clip of that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I have much more of it. You know,
Yeah.
I have the whole short, but it's about a woman who gets a Dear John letter. She's drunk and she tries to kill herself, and she keeps failing. And it's very funny, but the director ruined it. Not ruined it. I mean, it's still fun. The score, it's very, very important to have the right music.
Yeah.
And the gal that had been the producer on this, Might As Well Live, she'd gotten a friend to compose some marvelous track to support the comedy in this thing.
Yeah.
Well, the director, I don't care, I'll say it, she's from Russia, right? And I have no opinions, but she came from a very different culture, and she put in the strangest music that just, it could have been a totally different film.
Yeah.
And she ruined it. Not ruined, but it could have been so much better. That was the first time that I got that, you know, so my expectation was, I'm going to do my best, right? And there was a lot of physicality, because she just kept falling over and falling off the couch, and this and that, and struggling with curtains, and struggling with a gun, and trying to slit her wrist, and she just couldn't do it. Then she ends up falling out a window, and her jacket gets caught in the limb, and it starts raining, and she's just basically hanging there in the tree, and she goes to sleep because she's been doing all these sleeping pills. It should have been funny, and the music ruined it. So there's certain kind of expectations like that I couldn't even see coming.
Yeah, well, you're, I believe, my 17th actor interview, and you're the second person that's mentioned something like that, that they did a role, there's a tenor that they have on set, the expectation of what the scene is supposed to be, and then they see either the TV episode or the film, and the music totally goes against the grain, and
yes.
And your acting seems worse because of the scoring, and how that there's a poem by a poet named Lawrence Ferlinghetti called "Constantly Risking Absurdity," where it talks about writing a poem sort of being like a tightrope. Well, you know that poem?
No, I don't.
No, but
I like the title.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of that. Is that you can do what you do on set, you can nail everything, you can get all the kudos from your coworkers or the director, and then in the putting together, whether it's the director or the composer, or it's some suits that are money, or the editor, and it's all gone away, and you have no idea what you actually accomplished. That must be a very deflating feeling.
That's where trust comes in. That's where you it's very deflating. Yes, of course, you put all this energy into it. It could have been so wonderful, and so yeah. But like everything, a lot of it in life, but certainly more so in the arts, you go in, you give it your all, and then you have to forget about it.
Hmm.
Like with auditions, with the job, with doing the shoot, you have to then unhook from expectations. It's a balance, because I got to the point where I wouldn't even tell anybody I was in the show, that I'd done something, because I didn't know whether they still keep me in. I didn't know if they'd edit me out. There is a gal that did the TV movie, I think. She played one of the Kennedys. It was about the Kennedys. And she was one of the sisters. And she threw a huge party for the airing of it. Huge, 50 people with food, drinks, and everything. And they edited her out completely. And you don't know. So I would, it's hard to, you want to have fun and celebrate, but you don't know what it's going to be. Yeah. So there's that's a little lackluster there.
Well, let's end this segment, and in the final segment, we'll give you some chance to wrap up your thoughts on acting and your career, and we'll do that when we return. Well, I'm wrapping up my interview with Jacqueline O'Shaughnessy, Jacky O'Shaughnessy. I will link to her website below this video, and you can check out her website. You can look, I guess, you have some demo reels up of some of the work that you've done.
Yeah.
And uh, so let me just ask about what's coming up in the future. Have you done anything recently, or are you trying out for any films or television, or any plays recently? What's on your horizon?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I gave up acting. I didn't give up on it, but in 2000, my mother and one of my sisters died, and it was, there was a lot to handle, and I just bought a house, and I needed to I didn't have time to be working and trying to rip myself away from. I was a litigation legal secretary, and it was just grueling to try to get out and get to auditions, and I just got tired of life being so, at that time, difficult. So I just stopped. And then 11 years later, I moved back to New York. I got discovered as a model. So I've just started to revive the acting energy. I auditioned for a play. The guy met me in a restaurant. He's been sweet guy there's a theater group down here, and he said, "You're too young." It's the first time I heard that one. "You're too young for this role, but I'd really like you to audition." And I did, absolutely. I said sure, and that was wonderful to do an audition like that. And his compliments were lovely. And I thought, I want to get back to the acting. And the only auditioning I've been doing now have been for commercials so far. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're for vaginal cream, for, vaginal dryness. That's where women my age get to go and rep. What was the other one? Heart medication. So there's the shift on that, but at least my agent is sending me out, which is lovely, and I'm hoping to. I've been concentrating so much on the modeling that I'm now going back and putting more energy into the acting as well.
Well, you mentioned plus models. Is there a focus more now on older women? Because just looking, you'll be 65 by the end of this year, and as I said, you still you don't have that frumpy kind of look. You're tall. You're still I guess you would call what cougar would be the term. But do you think that maybe in the next 15 or 20 years, this fellow that I had mentioned, Basil Hoffman, the character actor, says he's getting more work now in his 70s. I think he's 76 or 78, I think. And he says he's getting more work than he did 30 or 40 years ago when he was in his 30s or 40s. Do you think that maybe there might be a chance that you could be working more as an actress, in your 60s and 70s than you were 20 or 30 years prior?
Absolutely. That's, to me, the only mindset one can have. I mean, it's, at least for me, or I'm not going to have any energy or enthusiasm. Maybe if I go, oh, there's only one or two roles maybe I can play, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be optimistic and think that we'll have women writing more. And then there's men have written marvelous things for women. So there's no more exclusion. No more assumptions, no more exclusion, but that more richer roles will be available. And yeah, I absolutely have my Pollyanna attitude. Yeah, it's going to be there for me.
Yeah. If you could have one role, either in film, television, or theater, and whether it's a classic role, Medea or Nora Helma, or if there was a kind of role, what would be like the one role that you'd like to play, say, and sort of hang your hat on? What kind of a character?
I don't have one.
No.
I really don't. I love comedy.
Mm-hmm.
No restriction there. It depends on the writing. I love Shakespeare. I love, that's a go-to place for actors, but I love Shakespeare not only for the beauty, but it's so easy for me to memorize Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I remember things in Shakespeare. I don't know why, but I remember that name because it's along a poem, poetic thing. Yeah, I wouldn't have known that playing Wanda in the waiting room was going to turn out to be such an extraordinary experience. It was amazing, and it was just so rich. And I got to be everything from very funny to very moving for people. I don't know. I'm always hoping that the best is yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
That people are going to be writing masterpieces tomorrow. What I'd have to say is that rather than being able to quote a playwright or a role that's already been done and written about, I look forward to playing a role that is as rich and flushed out as it can be. And that's the only thing I can say.
Well, let's end on that note. JacquelineO'Shaughnessy.com is your website. Anyone who's enjoyed this conversation can look you up or contact you there. And I just want to thank you for spending a couple of hours talking with me.
Thank you, Ben. I had a much better time than I expected.
Well,
I didn't expect a bad time. I didn't at all. But this was fun. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm a fun and magnetic guy, I'm told. Thanks.
Well,